All right, folks, welcome back. Can continue in chapter 3 here. Um, last set of lectures, or last lecture, ended talking about the division of labor, and we're going to start with that in this lecture. So, some basic theories of how men came to dominate, because as we see throughout this particular chapter, what we think is what happened in history actually might not have happened in history. So if we're making an argument that men have dominated since the days of cavemen, it certainly feels that way. That's what we've been taught, the old caveman analogy where man goes and grabs women by hair and drags her into the cave. As if she's her property and as if she has no right or control over her own life or any value within these small communities. That actually is not true. Um, Archaeologists and anthropologists over time have reconstructed the historical record, and it shows that women were equals, if not even more important than men historically. The hunting was not near as prominent as the gathering was, and so women's roles in providing food for the tribe were extremely important. But things changed over time, and if you've taken any sociology course, one of the first places that sociologists really begin to examine the rise of um, uh, dominant subordinate relationships is in reference to private property. Um, uh, there's evidence that women had much more equality before the advent of private property, and much of the male construction of dominance happens post development of private property, which of course is in reference to the rise of industrialization, the rise of capitalism, how capitalism ultimately eroded family economies, and uh, as you start to accumulate property in order to pass property on, you have to list somebody who is going to gain this property when it's all said and done. And we start to transfer wealth to the oldest son. And as power is put into the hands of those who own and control money and property, of course, the role and importance and inferiority of so the role and importance of women begins to fall to the wayside, and the construction of women as inferior uh, really starts to take hold. Um, uh, there's many problems with the development of private property, gendering, and the inequality of females in reference to males certainly is one of them. We can see this dominant subordinate relationships start to take shape in reference to race, ethnicity. The development of private property and the dominant subordinate relationships that come as a result of it are very important to the development of Western civilization. Another category is war. Warring societies or warrior societies tend to devalue the human, or tend to devalue the female. They practice, generally speaking, female infanticide. This is an effort to ensure lower numbers of women, which in turn keeps women from the fighting forces, thus subjugating their power. So in a warrior society, if you're not part of the warrior class, then you are seen as unequal. And of course, male bonding societies, they tend to uh, define the some of the theories of male domination as well, because men lack that mother-child bond. they make up for it by bonding with other men as adults. This is seen as the descent theory by Tiger and Fox. And men organize social life around their relationships and their control of women as sexual and marital objects. These two theories, one by Levi Strauss, known as the alliance theory, and the other, the descent theory by Tiger and Fox, are attempts to understand this concept of male domination and where it comes from. This closeness between father and son, though, also is used as a way to, or as a variable that explains the importance of women in societies as well. So just because we find it in one place doesn't mean that it's always going to be someplace else or not be someplace else. Some of the key determinants of women's status. One is a determinant in the development of the status of the division of labor, especially in regard to childcare and child rearing, as well as the relationship between children and their parents. If women are the sole providers of children, they tend to be seen as inferior within their societies. Upon closer look, Coltrane talks about this closeness between the father and son that I alluded to in the previous slide. This, according to Coltrane, this closeness between the father and the son, it actually results in a higher status for women. And the more mothers and fathers share child rearing, the less men belittle women. And you see a decrease in this hypermasculine behavior that is very common in male-dominated societies. Spatial segregation between men and women is also very much associated with gender inequality. Women's economic powers and ability to be self-sufficient in the public sphere is, of course, linked to sex segregation. If a woman cannot go out and make her own way, then she is trapped in the relationship with the male that she's tied to. And we see this spatial segregation also in reference to where the men reside. So if there is a man cave, a man house, a place where all of the men congregate, we tend to see females seen as inferior in those types of societies. So if you segregate males and females, what we tend to see is a devaluing of the female and a valuing of the male. So in reference to the determinants of women's status, the research can be summarized into these key findings. Men's overall dominance is lower when men and women work together. Kind of self-explanatory, right? If women and men are working the same jobs, they're interacting, communicating on a regular basis, you can imagine respect starting to take shape and one group seeing the other group as equals. Men's overall dominance is higher when men control political and ideological resources. Once again, you give the men the power and they will construct dominance with it. Men's dominance is exacerbated under colonization, including in places living under continued colonial legacies, which that includes the U.S. as well. Colonization very much runs in harmony with industrialization, capital, private property, all of these things that we have talked about being determinants of women being seen as inferior. And environmental stresses such as natural disasters or war tend to exaggerate this idea of men's dominance as well. That brings us to some rituals and practices that we see in different cultures, which gives us an idea that gender itself and the behaviors associated with gender are nothing other than social constructions. The first that we look at, and we will look at this unfortunately because it's a terrible topic, but it's an important topic. We'll look at this particular concept of rape throughout the course. Part of the ritualization of war is mass rape in warfare. It's really a final way for the victors to dehumanize the folks that lost, whether it's abusing the women themselves to humiliate them, or to humiliate the men, as if we will take everything from you, including we will rape your women and impregnate them with our children, and you will suffer because of it. Rape as a punishment for committing other crimes. As you get into the book Half of the Sky, you will see numerous examples of this. A woman gets raped in India. She reports it as a crime and then is raped by the police herself. And rape as a form of male bonding. Once again, as you read through Half the Sky, you will see this as well. A ritualization of male dominance and bonding at the expense of women. Of course, the chapter also talked about circumcision and female genitalia cutting. Both of these are initiation rituals marking adulthood, and one is a male bonding ritual, and the other is so for males it's a male bonding ritual. For females, it's generally a way to prevent them from wanting to have sex. So the removal or the genital cutting of a female, removing the clitoris, is designed to take sexual pleasure away from the act, therefore preventing the woman from seeking out this sexual pleasure that she might as an adult. And then, of course, you have the purdah, or the ritual covering practices. The idea here is, and we see this in many Muslim communities, in women, it is believed in these societies that women are so attractive that we males can't control ourselves, so we cover them to prevent sexual intercourse from happening. And of course, it's the women's fault, not the men's. That brings us to gender diversity. As we look through different cultures, we see that there are many cultures in which gender is not the central organizing principle of social life, or in which there are diverse understandings and enhancement of gender and gender identity. In the Navajo, you see this as the Natal, or the masculine men, feminine women, one whose sex is ambiguous. The Oaxaca in Mexico have the Muxes, or the third gender, where males who grow up align more with their gender identity of a woman. The Mojave have the Alaya, where a male adopts the female role, and the Huame, where the female adopts the male role, and in the Middle East, the Xanthith, where males identify as females. And in many respects, these third gender types of individuals are seen as important, and they have power and standing in their society. This brings us to the values of cross-cultural research. Anthropological research has helped to expose the faulty logic of those who argue that the universality of gender difference is somehow natural and inevitable. And really, it's just cultural relativism that explains most of what we see out there. But in the end, we have to ask ourselves, if men's domination is not natural, why does it persist in so many places? And we'll get into that as we move forward into the next chapter.